Good evening, everybody.
Hello, Mayor.
Hello.
Did you get my message about the Bambino?
Yeah,
Hello.
that's old news. Come on. I mean, 2004 took care of that. It should be an interesting game, though.
Yeah, it will be.
You know, Clete Boy is not playing third base anymore.
I know. That was an interesting meeting this morning, Trustee Rogan.
Yeah, it sure was. It was great to see everybody convene again.
I liked hearing from everybody. You know, bigger municipalities that are getting a lot more money have a lot more leeway and programs that they can contribute to, but we'll do our best here.
Yeah.
Trustee Wah, how are you?
It's fine. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Trustee Miller, are you on? Hi, Wendy. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Brandon, you can start the workshop if you like, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Good to see everybody. Sorry, I was a minute late. My webcam was having some issues connecting. So this is a workshop on the wireless code update. I do have a short PowerPoint presentation to kind of get us started with the discussion. I understand it is a long and technical code, but we're going to kind of get into the reasons why that is and why it's not the usual ordinance we work on here. So I'm going to share my screen. So can everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. So some of you on the previous board may have seen some of these slides before. They are carried over to some extent from a previous presentation was given on telecommunications facilities in the past. However, there's some new information, so it's not entirely all to review, and it is relevant to this wireless code update. But you know, the reason why now is really the time to update the wireless code is largely driven by small cell technology. And small cell technology, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is really a way to enable greater network density. As kind of shown on this slide, you know, the amount of data being transmitted on wireless networks has really grown exponentially. And the existing wireless facilities that are out there, the traditional macro cell tower sites, are really mostly designed to enable text and voice communications and not so much mobile data communications. And so the small cell technology is really meant to fill in these gaps and really dense areas, mostly where there's really a need and a demand for high data throughput. And so as you can see that, you know, that's really growing really fast in terms of, you know, this is through 2020, but the number of exabytes, which is, you know, you can imagine 1 million, you know, terabytes of data has grown, you know, really exponentially in the years. Something, you know, to keep in mind with small cells generally is that, you know, they are small in their coverage area, not in their design. It's, you know, often a misnomer. You know, they're viewed by industry as being easier to site because they can be smaller than your traditional macro cell design. But generally speaking, you know, the small is in reference to how long the wireless signals propagate, not so much the actual design of the facility. You know, when you have, as a matter of physics, when you have smaller wavelengths, which enable those greater speeds and higher data throughput, smaller waves don't travel as far. And so that's why you get these really small coverage area cells. And whereas the you know, traditional macro towers have longer wavelengths, they go much farther. And that's kind of, you know, they're complementary technologies. One does not replace the other. So, you know, what is a small cell? They really come in a variety of different designs, and we'll kind of go through some of those. As I mentioned, they rely on higher frequency bands and the radio spectrum frequency, much faster, can pack much more data in there, but they don't go very far, and so that's really the difference. State and federal law greatly, as you'll see, greatly restrict our ability to cite and locate these things. They also define what a small cell is pretty specifically. And as you see that, the equipment enclosure that the state law puts out that's mirrored in federal law is 17 cubic feet. So that's a refrigerator roughly. And so once again, while they may be called small cells, the actual equipment themselves, is not small at all. And, the height can be unlimited potentially. And so you could have a refrigerator sitting on top of a 40-foot pole, and that's still considered a small cell pursuant to state and federal law. And there's also things called microcells that exist out there. Microcells are even smaller. They're not as popular with a lot of the carriers. T-Mobile is one that primarily installs those. Comcast has some microcell technology out there too. As you'll see in a couple slides, these are typically hung on wireline facilities. They're standalone towers. There's also transport facilities that also you may see sometimes, which are there's two ways to connect a wireless facility to the back end internet. One way is you attach a fiber optic cable, which is the preferred way to do it, to reach the internet back end. And then another way you can do it that's potentially less costly is you have what's called a transport facility, where we're using a microwave technology to wirelessly transmit back to the internet back end. And so sometimes in some network designs, in addition to having small cells or microcells, you may also have a transport facility that's just intended to basically be, the hub really on the spoke design of the network. They're not propagating signals themselves to end users, but they're like the communications tower to the individual small cell nodes that are out there on the network. A popular place, and probably a popular place in Lions if the technology does come to places where we can regulate this, is streetlights. Streetlights are kind of the perfect height and size to host a variety of different types of small cells. These are different types of designs that are out there. There's even better ones that have more recently been done. The one on the left is from Colorado Springs, for example. But streetlights are one of the most common areas to site these. And so if you're driving around the Denver metro area and see a key antenna on top of a streetlight, that's what you're looking at, is a small cell. They can also be in some places be located on distribution poles as well, electric distribution poles. Most utilities discourage that, but they are allowed in some places. The reason why it's typically discouraged is because you have to be in the hot zone of the electric utility space in order to maintenance these, which most utilities don't like. And so they're discouraged for the most part from being a first place to place these types of facilities. Probably the most common one you're going to see out there in Colorado, at least, is standalone facilities. These are all from Denver, but you can find almost identical designs pretty much anywhere in Colorado these days, at least in the more dense metro areas. The reason in Colorado typically why you see standalone facilities as opposed to streetlight facilities is because until recently, Xcel Energy has not allowed small cells to be placed on their streetlights. And pretty much every place in Colorado that isn't a municipal utility up until pretty recently, Xcel Energy is the owner of the streetlights. And so especially in Denver, but other places as well, you see a lot of standalone small cell facilities. The ones that are being done up Highway 36, or for example, these small cell standalone facilities. And they can have, they're pretty, usually what happens is when they are, cited in municipal highways, what we do is as part of implementing our wireless code is what we're doing here today. We create design standards which kind of shape the design of the facility so they look more aesthetically pleasing, like these designs, and a uniform rather than kind of a hodgepodge of designs and they're out there. So these are all in Denver. We help develop along with Denver's internal staff. design standards in Denver to make sure there's kind of a uniform design for small cells in the city and county. As I mentioned earlier, another type of design that's out there is microcells. These are far less common in Colorado, but they do exist, and this is what they may look like. They don't have as many siting problems as small cells and macro towers, obviously, because they are so small. They look pretty similar to your average cable equipment that's mounted in the telecommunication space. And as I mentioned earlier, they're primarily deployed by Comcast and then also T-Mobile has experimented with this technology as well, but they're pretty small. They're only mounted on these wireline telecommunications spaces and not really their own standalone pole facility. A common misconception out there is that small cells and 5G are the same thing. They are not. 99% of what you see out there in the wild, that's a small cell, is not 5G. There are actually 4G small cells as well. 5G refers to a very particular kind of technology that's really new to market, and that stands for 5th generation wireless technology. The standard was not even finalized until. Oh, Mayor, do you have a question? Mayor?
I was thanking the administrator for my coffee was all.
Oh, okay. No worries. So that, as I was saying, 5G technology is relatively new. It wasn't even finalized as a standard until 2017. What the promise of 5G is that you've probably heard in the commercials is that it's a lot faster, lower latency, so enables things like live streaming better and mobile gaming, and the ability to really connect a lot of devices at once. Those are kind of the primary benefits that are promised. However, not all 5G is created equal. There's, even within the 5G standard, there's different sub technologies, if you will. What you see promoted is the millimeter wave 5G, which offers really, really fast speeds, but really short range. Once again, physics, because it's so fast, you can't propagate it very far. That technology is basically non-existent in the wild. We don't really have a lot of that out there. It's really only economical and very highly dense urban environments, because these things only go a couple hundred feet, and if you need to deploy, you'd have to deploy a whole bunch of those in order to reach a lot of people in a town like Lyons in terms of density. It's much easier, obviously, to reach more people in a place like New York City or downtown Denver, but the millimeter wave 5G, which is really the transformational technology, doesn't really exist much out there in the wild at all. I mean, probably not something we'll ever see much of, if at all, in Lyons in terms of the millimeter wave 5G. There's also a product called 5GE, which AT&T has. That's not even 5G at all, but it's really just 4G LTE rebranded. It's a better, newer version of 4G LTE, but it's not 5G. There's the types of 5G you actually see in Colorado are not the millimeter wave, but other kinds of 5G, which are closer to 4G in terms of performance, but they're not compatible with 4G radios in your cell phone. And so unless you have, really the newest phones, you're not able to utilize this technology at all. This technology is faster. It has more range than millimeter wave 5G, but it does not require as many facilities as a small cell 5G millimeter wave that you see. So this is all to say that really what you see out there is a lot of 4G small cells and not a ton of 5G small cells, but more over time. And as we mentioned, this millimeter wave 5G, which is really transformational technology, extremely fast but extremely low range, and so you have to require small cells and a lot of them in order to make the network work. And similar, the 4G small cells are out there. They're a type of 4G that is faster on the scale of different wireless technologies, but they don't propagate as far because of physics, and so you need more of them in order to create a coverage area. And so because we have all these new technologies out there, there's been a whole bunch of legislative and regulatory activity to encourage the deployment of these technologies. Our wires closed last updated in the mid 2000s and here in Lyons. And since then, there's been a whole bunch of legislative actions and in FCC interpretations of past legislative actions that create limitations on our authority to regulate wireless in general, not just small cells, but this all trickles back to macro towers and other types of wireless facilities. And this is not intended to, I'm not intending to read through all of these, but just really show you that there's a breadth, and this is not a complete list either, but there's a whole bunch of laws out there, both at the federal and state level, which really restrict our ability to regulate wireless technology. So it's a very careful dance that we have to play to maximize our local control, while at the same time being in line with both the federal and state laws that are out there. A few I just wanted to point out of this list, the Telecommunications Act has been interpreted by the FCC many times, but the two big provisions more or less say that we can't stop any entity from providing telecommunication services. And so if somebody wants to come into the town and they would be prohibited from providing service if we didn't allow that facility to be activated, we can't say no. We can put limitations on what that device may look like or where it goes to some extent. But if there's only one location in town that facility can work, then we are prohibited under federal law from saying no to citing that facility. And so that's something to keep in mind. There's also all sorts of restrictions on what the review periods are for those facilities, including if it's a very special kind of facility known as an eligible facilities request, which is you may have also call a co-location, where there's an existing site of some kind, someone wants to put an additional antenna on it usually, or to modify that site to some degree. We are required by federal law to approve that application, and with a 60-day shot clock. And if we forget about reviewing that application, it gets lost in that paper file somewhere, it's automatically approved. It's deemed approved by federal law. So they just go out and build it without any building permits from the town. And so that's yet another example of how limited we are in regulating a lot of this stuff. There's a whole bunch of FCC rules recently. We'll dive into a couple in a second, but these really limit the fees we can charge, how long we have to approve, when and why we can say no, and how we can say no, if ever, on these facilities. And Colorado law, in addition to that, is really places a ton of limitations on what we can do, from things like cost, review times. We can't require franchise fees or require in-kind services of any kind for telecommunication services. This is all to say it's a very restrictive environment for what we're allowed to do with regards to our own local regulation. And to jump into some of the more pertinent laws that are out there, starting with the small cell law in Colorado. It was passed in 2017, but has really kind of ramped into gear as more of these things get deployed. The big one for us is that small cells are used by right in any zoning district. And so no matter what we say in our local code about where you can place wireless communications facilities, even under the existing code, which places limitations on that, under state law, it is a use by right. And so we essentially have to approve it so long as it's consistent with our local land use regulations with regards to the aesthetics of the facility. And so if someone wants to deploy a wireless facility, so long as it otherwise complies with, common safety standards, that facility must be approved. There's also a shot clock for when we can, from the time you receive that application to the point where it's approved, that we have to approve that application. So it's 90 days under state law. As we'll talk about, federal laws change that somewhat. And in larger jurisdictions, it's probably not going to be the case in Lyons ever, but like in Denver, for example, there's required to be so many small cells in order to make the small cell network work, that you have to file many applications at a time. And so we call that a batch application, where you may file 20, 30 applications for small cells at a time as a carrier. And of course, there's 3 major carriers out there. And so those are called batch applications, and state law specifically provides for that. It also requires us to put up our light poles, traffic signals, utility poles, make them available for co-location of small cells. And so if a wireless carrier wants to attach to a street light in Lyons, it can do so if we own that street light, so long as it meets all required safety requirements. There, both state law and federal law creates all sorts of limitations on fees. There is a federal pole attachment rule out there that talks about wireline attachments, but there's also now a federal law that talks about fees on for wireless facilities as well on things like streetlights. So that's the FCC small cell order. It came out in September. It was heavily litigated up through the end of 2020 between local governments and the FCC and the wireless industry, because it does create a whole bunch of restrictions on, again, local control of the right of way. And what this is, what the rule really does, it creates a material inhibit standard for looking at local regulations. And if our local regulations materially inhibit the ability to provide telecommunication services, then that rule is prohibited or preempted under federal law. And so that, as we look at the wireless code we have drafted, it's really guided by this principle, and that we can't overreach. We have to work within a very limited box of, being one, consistent with federal law, and then two, not creating any sort of standard that would materially inhibit the ability to provide wireless communication services. And so that's kind of what creates this complicated technical wireless code that we are more or less required to pass under federal law. There's numerous conflicts between the state and federal laws. We don't have to get too far into this, but one thing to keep in mind: at first, a lot of local governments thought they may make a lot of money off of the deployments of wireless facilities like this, but the federal law preempted those local jurisdictions setting their own fees essentially, and what you essentially get is $100 for an application fee, and then $270 for the rent of the right of way is the maximum amount you can collect for these facilities. And so it's not a money maker. The wireless industry even argues in Colorado that you should get even less money than that, at a point where the local community is often at a loss to approve these things due to some uniqueness under Colorado law concerning the Federal Pole Attachment Act and its applicability to local governments. But for the most part, $270 per pole for rent of the right of way, and then $100 for the application fee is the maximum you can charge. Something that's in our wireless code, spacing requirements, something we don't want to see, and hopefully it's never the case in Lyons, is that you'd have one every 20, 50 feet, because all the three carriers would need their own poles, right? And so you could end up with what we call pole clutter, where there's really a forest of wireless facilities. So we create spacing requirements. These are harshly looked at under federal law, but generally we've been able to do it in a way that it doesn't violate federal law. Aesthetic standards are greatly limited. This has changed somewhat due to a recent federal court decision, but if you have any aesthetic standards, it can't create a material inhibition on provision of wireless services, which means it must be objectively reasonable and not open subjective interpretation, and they must be no more burdensome than those imposed on other industries such as electric utilities or cable utilities. We can't create separate standards for the wireless industry versus those other industries. I mentioned earlier shot clocks. Federal government, the FCC loves implementing shot clocks on review periods for wireless facilities. For the new one for small cells is 90 days for a standalone pole and 60 days for a co-located pole, which means attaching to a street light or a traffic signal. And so there's not a lot of time to, if we get one of these applications, one that we are able to review and approve, we don't have a lot of time to make that judgment call on whether it should be permitted, whether it's consistent with our generally applicable right-of-way regulations and wireless code. Something I always want to bring up when I talk about wireless communications facilities is radio frequency emissions. I know that most citizens, that's their primary concern with small cells. And unfortunately, this is an area where the federal government has really grossly overstepped its bounds, and at least in my opinion, and has limited the role of local and state governments in considering this issue. And really, at this point in the case law, any state or local law attempting to regulate environmental effects, which include EMF and radio frequency emissions, is preempted. And there's been numerous federal court cases which support this. The Telecom Act's express preemption of this issue. The FCC has the sole authority to set health emission standards. These standards have not been updated since 1996, unfortunately. The FCC issued a decision declining to update these, which hasn't really helped the public concern about wireless emissions issues, especially with small cells, is the higher millimeter wave frequencies and then being closer to where people live and work. Recently, however, a federal appeals court did order the FCC to redo its decision declining to update the 1996 standards. So maybe there might be some new standards in the future, but really, so long as a wireless carrier can prove that they have an FCC license, and that FCC license shows that they're in compliance with the 1996 standards, there's nothing the state or local government can do with regard to regulating on the basis of any sort of environmental effects. There have been some communities that have created restrictions that violate federal law. There's a handful of communities in California that have done this. They have been sued extensively in federal court and have lost. Some people point this out that, this community or that community has stopped 5G deployment, and that's simply not the case. Federal law is very clear that we cannot, one, prohibit the deployment of wireless facilities, and then two, we cannot regulate on the basis of the potential environmental effects of telecommunications facilities. And so just clear up that concern. It is unfortunate that the FCC, one, has declined to update these standards, and then two, that both we as a local government, also the state of Colorado, is really unable to do anything with regard to these issues. But that is the state of the law today. So the process in which we generally take, whether it be Lions, or I'm doing the same thing in Estes Park right now as well, or even a larger jurisdiction, for preparing for small cell deployment, is one, we update the wireless code. And so that's where we are at right now, is updating the wireless code to address small cells, but two, as I mentioned, that the existing code had not been updated for some time. There's been numerous other new federal regulations with regard to other types of wireless facilities that we also need to incorporate into our code. And so that's what we're doing right now. The next step, and the other three steps are all administrative actions. They don't require board approval of any kind, but would be to develop design standards. There are some of these already embedded in the wireless code that is up for first reading tonight. But if the town felt the need to supplement those, they could do so administratively, and many places have decided to do that. Have administrative design standards that really supplement and build upon the requirements in the code. Once we get a carrier in town that is interested in deploying small cells in the right of way in places that are not CDOT right of way, which in Lions is a pretty limited area, we would enter into a master license agreement with that carrier, which would be kind of the overarching right of way permission to construct small cells in town-owned right of way. And so that would be the next step in negotiating with developing that master license agreement and negotiating with the carriers. And just in terms of the way I see deployment in Lions happening, if at all, previously I had updated the previous board that I didn't think there would be a whole lot of small cell deployment in Lions because of the lack of fiber primarily, but also the density of the town. This didn't really make sense for a lot of small cell deployment. The economics of that have changed somewhat since CDOT has decided to publicly fund a fiber connection essentially from the middle of town up all the way up through Highway 36 to Estes Park. That was the primary barrier from an economic standpoint from allowing small cell deployment to happen in Lyons. And so that economic barrier at least has been removed. There's still the issue of density. So there's probably only a few places in town where it would make sense to put up a small cell facility, just because the density of the town's not enough to really justify, especially this higher end 5G millimeter wave deployments. There's just not enough density for a facility that only goes a few hundred feet. So I think we could see some now that we have this this fiber line running up Highway 36. But again, probably a limited number. They'll probably be concentrated towards the downtown area. This where that you could see more people and where the density is justified to put that type of facility up. So now I kind of wanted to walk through, the code structure that we've put together, and to kind of explain, again, some of the complexity of the code and why the way it is. First off, there's the definition section. I understand it's a lengthy definition section. A number of these definitions, like substantial change, may seem a bit counterintuitive. They're lengthy. They're not simple by any means. They're not easily comprehensible by the average person. But these definitions, almost all of them, are straight from federal law. They're straight from FCC regulation, which says that you, local government, if you choose to regulate wireless facilities, must pass a code with this definition. And so we are pretty much stuck with the definition of substantial change as reflected in this code, and a number of other definitions, such as that of small cell, micro cell, tower. Pretty much any sort of technical term in this code is derived directly from federal law, which explains why they are the way they are. The next, and if anyone says anything, once we get through the presentation, we have any questions on any particular definition, be happy to go over what the interpretation of that definition is. So, our firm primarily, other people in the firm primarily deal in this area of the law. So I do have quite a bit of experience with implementing these codes and, working with the wireless industry on deploying facilities. The next section of the code is the purpose and goals section. This is the intent language of the code. And what it's really trying to do is when the board of trustees or the town staff need to look back on whether a facility should be permitted in the instances where we do have that option to deny a facility, is to provide that intent. It's like, is this mean that the intent of this code? And so it just provides some kind of direction as to what this code is about and whether not a facility should be approved with regards to general intent. Applicability is fairly straightforward. One thing I will mention is that there are a number of facilities that federal law prohibits us from regulating, such as amateur radio facilities. Your HOA may be able to regulate those, but us as a local government have basically non-existent capability to regulate amateur radio facilities. Another thing too that people often ask about is existing facilities. If there's an existing facility that wouldn't comply with this code, unfortunately, we would not be able to retroactively go back and regulate that facility, both under federal law and also under state law land use concepts and non-conforming uses. And so that's another area where this code would not be applicable. As many of us have learned recently in town, if this code does not apply to facilities of the state located in state right of way. And that's both under federal, state, that's mostly under state law, where we're not allowed to regulate facilities in state right of way that are owned by the state. So if it's a CDOT facility, they have ownership of the facility. We really have no ability to force the design or size or location of that facility. CDOT may give the option for us to provide input, some limited amount of input on that facility, but under state law, we are not allowed to directly regulate the permitting in that facility. Operational standards, again, greatly limited by federal law, really in two places. One, being the environmental effects that we talked about earlier being specifically prohibited. There's also a number of issues that the FAA has issues with, including what colors it can be painted, as you wouldn't want to reflect and be a barrier to pilots in navigation. And also lighting is another area that the FAA has some say on, and what a warehouse facility can look like. The important thing for us in this code is, I think, is these next few sections, starting with design standards. And this is what the facilities look like, which is primarily what we're concerned with, right? What they look like, how tall they are, what they can be spaced. Those are what we hope to use to limit the impacts on the community of the deployment of warehouse facilities. And that's really kind of the bread and butter of the code. As I mentioned earlier, we can supplement these administratively if we want to provide additional interpretation of the design standards, including like things like color. Like Denver has a very specific color. For example, they want things painted. It's called federal green, and they have a color palette. We could pass a regulation, mandating that all warehouse facilities be painted federal green. All small cells in the right of way be painted federal green. And so that's, this is to be viewed as a starting point, not necessarily an end point for what design standards should be. In terms of review procedures, it's pretty lengthy on how that works. But the basic concept is that base stations, alternative tower structures in the right of way, which are small cells, these are all done administratively. And the reason for this is that, as I mentioned earlier, there are very short shot clocks. For a warehouse facility, the statutory street light, you have 60 days from the date you receive that application, the date it is approved. It's not really feasible for the Board of Trustees and the PCDC to schedule meetings and to determine, whether or not that facility should be allowed. And even more so, to that point, as I mentioned, we are prohibited from state and federal law from even denying these facilities, really. And so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for the Board of Trustees to, spend the time to have that sort of approval process if the end result is really a yes anyways. And so we direct all these types of facilities, which are generally less intrusive anyways, to administrative review consistent with the code. Towers, which are the big macro facilities that you may more traditionally be aware of, are an area we still have a great deal of control about where they are located, what they look like, how tall they can be, what zoning districts they can be allowed in. And so it's appropriate in these situations for the BOT with a PCDC recommendation to be the approval process. And so what the code does is it uses the existing special use review process in the code to evaluate these types of facilities. We have done this fairly recently, and Lions approved these types of facilities using the special review process. And I think we're going to maintain that going forward in this code because we can. That's the area where we are allowed the maximum extent of control under state and federal law. And then at the very end of this code is the standards of approval. That basically provides the criteria by which the review happens, whether it be administrative or board and PCDC review. And they're pretty straightforward in this code. They're really just compliance with the code. And also, if there's a tower, compliance with the special use review process. And so that's kind of the structure of the code. As I mentioned earlier, we do quite a lot of these. We've had good luck now. At first, this was kind of the wild, wild west, updating these codes to comply with small cell technology and what we can and can't do. Now, at this point, I'd say probably since 2017, we've probably done 20, 30 warehouse codes, or if not more, including where I'm doing one in Estes Park right now. And so the Lions code is fairly consistent with those. It's simpler than some of the bigger jurisdictions. It doesn't make sense to have a code that's as big as, say, Thornton's or Aurora's, because we don't have the staff to do that kind of management. But I think it's basically the minimum we need to comply with several federal and state law, given the numerous changes that have happened really within the past, 10 years, but certainly the last 5 years where this has really accelerated. And so I'm happy to walk through each section of the code. At this point, I could pull that up, or we could, answer individual questions about some of the definitions in particular can be hard to understand at times, or about the process. I'd be happy to go over that. But, really the intent was just to bring the town into compliance with the law, given how much has changed. And that, given the CDOT project makes it more likely for small cells to happen, it seems like prudent at this time to update the code to be ready for when there are small cells in town that we do have siting authority over. So any questions?
And then under review procedures and requirements, that's only relative to anything in the town right of ways. We have no jurisdiction on CDOT right of ways or any other federal right of ways. Is that correct?
That's correct. If it was owned by a wireless company, if it was an AT&T tower and CDOT right away, there would be additional ability for maybe apply our design standards, but CDOT would be the final permitting authority for that facility. And so unfortunately, in a town like Lyons or Estes Park, where the main thoroughway is a CDOT right away, that does greatly limit in what we can do. However, this is primarily intended to regulate town right away and then also private property for those macro tower facilities.
Okay. Any other questions for Brandon? Trustee Rogan?
Yeah, thank you. And Brandon, we're lucky to have you as our attorney here because I know you have a lot of experience with this. So is there any way for us to get advance notice if there is going to be a tower going in on federal or CDOT right away? And in terms of where small cells in town would go, you said there are limited locations. Can you describe where those are?
Yeah, of course. So the first question, it would be at the option of the permitting authority to give us that advance notice. Luckily in CDOT's case, they have given us some limited notice. There's probably not a lot of federal siting. Usually those are macro towers, and we probably would receive little to no notice of those going in. In my experience, typically those just go up because they require a special use permit. So if it was on Forest Service land, for example, the Forest Service would have exclusive jurisdiction over siting those facilities. And they probably would not provide the town with any notice. In my experience, that maybe if we had a Forest Service agent that was nice and let the town know, that'd be great, but they're under no obligation to provide us with that notice. And so usually they don't. With regard to the second question, where small cells might go, that's a great question. It's going to go in areas where there's, density, because that's what the technology is really meant to address is data throughput for dense population centers. And so I think in Lyons in particular, where you might see this is in the commercial downtown areas, especially, I think, the CDOT right away is already pretty full through there. And so maybe on the streets behind some of the commercial businesses, you might see something, which in that case, the town would have jurisdiction over siting, so we'd have a lot of say on what it looks like and where it goes. The other place where you might see this is in the Eastern Corridor as it develops. It make a lot of sense actually to put it out there. You can kind of integrate it into the infrastructure as it's built, rather than trying to retrofit the infrastructure to allow for this technology. And so that'd be another place I think where you'd see it. Potentially, maybe the wedding venues might make sense, but it's so seasonal and so on and off. It may make a hard economic case for a lot of the providers to justify, especially if they can cover it with their existing stuff elsewhere. And so those would really be the three kind of areas where I'd see it popping up. Maybe as the technology matures and it's not as expensive, then it may find its way into other places. That's probably pretty far down the line given the existing prices.
Any other questions? Thank you, Brandon, for a very comprehensive workshop. I appreciate it. and I'm sure the Board of Trustees does as well.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take a break and come back at 7 o'clock.
All right, thank you.
What, do you got some fishing stories for me, Lowell? Did you hear me, Lowell? You got some fishing stories for me?
Yeah, I went out today. It was very pleasant. Really nice day. Really nice day. I
Good.
mean, I got a couple, nothing spectacular, but it was just nice to be on the water.
I bet.
Yeah. So are you still playing Bachelor, you and the pup? Or is
Yes,
Candace,
till the end of the month.
so you're not going to Maine, right?
I'm not. I was gonna, but I decided not to.
Well, probably a good decision. Well, not personally. I mean, it's spectacular weather there now, but just the whole flying and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's nuts.
All right, so we're gonna set a record tonight, right? 1 hour and 45 minutes.
Well, we'll have to see. Wouldn't that be something?
Well, you won't get any complaints from me if the discussions tend to taper off quickly, so.
I'll tell you guys, we have house guests. Patrick's oldest friends from high school are visiting, and
Cool.
they're visiting with their 2 dogs. They're 2 Springer Spaniels. One of them is a 5-month-old puppy,
Oh, geez.
and she is the cutest thing. But I have no way of keeping her out of my office because I don't have a door. So if a dog, just don't worry about it. I mean, I had to put my dogs in boarding because it would have just been mayhem in an 1,100 square foot house.
Yeah, we love puppies. No
Oh, it's
problem.
great. It's great. It's just great. Here,
Well,
maybe she can make an appearance before we start. Hey, Lula. Lula. Come here, puppy. Shockingly, she's not listening.
Well, now you've done it. You've called my dog down cellar.
Is your dog named Lula?
No, yeah, come on.
Oh, no, here's Leo. You guys probably can't see him. Leo.
I think,
Oh, here. Oh, what? Yeah, I'm showing him up here. I'm going to unblur my video for a second. Oh my God, this is mayhem. I give up.
I can see them running in the background.
yeah.
They just like knocked over all the power cords and all that stuff.
Good evening, everybody. I'll call the Monday, October 4th, 2021 Lions Board of Trustees regular meeting to order. Could we please have the roll call, Madam Clerk?
Yes, Mayor Angelo,
Present.
Pro Tem Browning, Trustee Lowell,
Present.
Trustee Rogan,
Present.
Trustee Caravas,
Present.
Trustee Miller,
Present.
and Trustee Waugh.
Present.
Please all rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In Lions, we take a reflective moment of silence, and I'll let everybody reflect on what they wish to reflect on this evening. Thank you. Since the last meeting, I'll just make a statement that we have lost as many people to COVID as we lost during the Vietnam War. It's a staggering fact. We're well over 700,000 deaths now. Could we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Are there any items that we would like to see removed from the agenda? I have one. It's under, where is it? It's the consideration of the land. I can't find it on here. Oh, the quick claim deed, number 12. There's been a change in that discussion, and I'd like to delete that from the agenda.
Mayor,
Yes,
I believe you also had said something to me about removing resolution 105 regarding the climate.
I thought that we do that when we vote on approving resolution.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
all right, so I guess we could vote on approving the resolution with that change, if that's fine with everybody.
Is that a motion that we need a second for to modify the agenda?
Yes,
Yes.
I'll second.
thank you. Are there any further comments? I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
and Trustee Waugh.
Aye.
The agenda is approved as amended. Now is an opportunity for the audience to address their governing body. Please state your name and address for the record and be recognized. Thank you. Aaron Kaplan?
Hello, Aaron Kaplan, 1007 Steamboat Valley Road. I just thought I would give a few quick items of information after listening to the wireless workshop, just in case it was helpful. It was some information I thought was interesting and valuable. One was to make sure everyone was aware of what the G stood for when we talk about 5G or 4G. I've talked to others and they're not always aware that that's generation, right? So when we say 5G, it only means it's the 5th generation. So you want someone to try to explain what's the difference between the 5th generation and the 4th generation or the 3rd generation in a particular service. And in going a little bit further in that, it helps then to just have some basic, maybe not basic, but some physics that we can all go over. I had to refresh my own knowledge and just pulled up the electromagnetic spectrum. And so if you just do a quick search on that, that'll really help show we're talking about waves, right? You start from radio waves, getting into microwaves, light waves, ultraviolet waves, X-ray waves, right? You have the whole spectrum of waves. So we want to try to understand what actually is there, because which waves are worse than other waves, or are there problems? We do. X-ray waves are a concern. Gamma radiation at the top can be, but trying to understand the sun is out there. What we are actually talking about with waves and which ones. Are we going back all the way to TV waves and regular standard radio waves? Could be that they're a concern, I don't know, but just to help for some basic physics there. And the last one then being that, so everyone is also aware, if you haven't heard of Starlink, because Starlink is Elon Musk's new project where he's putting out 30,000 satellites. He's already got a few thousand up in the air. I actually saw 100 of them or so go by. If you ever see a stream of a bunch of what look like satellites, I don't know how often it happens, but you'll see 30,000 satellites will be in low orbit around the world at the 10 to 12 gigahertz frequency. So you can try to see where that's at. But again, we're going to have these all out there. So just to give some perspective on the wireless topic, that it gets to be in depth. And so maybe some of those as some basic physics items to try to get a basic understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would anybody else wish to address the Board of Trustees at this time?
Sir, Elizabeth Seacat has her hand raised.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. My name is Elizabeth Seacat, and I reside at 129 Longs Peak Drive in Lyons. I would like, thank you. I would like to address the board tonight. I wanted to follow up on an email that I sent to the mayor and the Board of Trustees on Sunday, October 3rd at 7:23 p.m. You may not have had an opportunity to review that email, but if I might, I would like to read that email as part of the audience business this evening.
You may.
Thank you, Mayor. Dear Mayor Angelo, Mayor Pro Tem Browning, and Trustees Mike Caravest, Greg Lowell, Wendy Miller, Holly Rogan, and Kenyon Waugh. My name is Elizabeth Seacat, and I have lived at 129 Longs Peak Drive at the top of the hill, adjacent to the town property, for 23 years. I have reviewed the September 20th, 2021 Board of Trustees meeting, whereby discussion pertaining to the sidewalk and the turnaround at the top of Longs Peak Drive occurred. I am writing to you today to provide additional information about the current use of town property by service vehicles for turnaround purposes. As shown in picture number 1 in my email, Western Disposal continues to use town property to turn around with ease. one-way disposal, and other UPS and Amazon delivery trucks use the same town property to turn around. This has been the practice that I have witnessed for the last 23 years. It seems to me that the length of this existing stretch of town property would be sufficient for an emergency vehicle, fire truck, public works snowplow to navigate in a similar manner. As an additional perspective for your reference, shown in picture number 2 is the fire hydrant that is located on this same stretch of town property that is currently used for turnaround purposes. You will also notice the beautiful native landscape that is present in this area. As a longtime resident of 23 years on Longs Peak Drive with firsthand knowledge of current turnaround practices, coupled with the fact that the board continues to seek and solidify funding for the Longs Peak Drive project, I do struggle to understand why a new Y design would be required instead of utilizing the same stretch of town property for turnaround purposes. With the addition of proper signage on the stretch of town property, it would be clear to everyone that this area is officially intended for use by emergency and service vehicles only. My request of the mayor and board of trustees is to please consider using the existing stretch of town property for emergency and service vehicles turnaround as shown in picture number 1 in my email, and forego the additional expense and disruption to the residents and to the land that a Y design will bring. Thank you very much for your consideration. Respectfully, Elizabeth Seacat, 129 Longs Peak Drive.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anybody else wish to address the Board of Trustees at this time?
Sir Ron Ravel has his hand raised.
Please state your name and address for the record, sir.
Good evening. My name is Ronald Rebell. I live at 124 Longs Peak Drive. And I just wanted to speak on in response to Elizabeth Seacat's assessment of the situation. We wholeheartedly agree with Elizabeth Seacat's assessment. We understand the need for the town to ensure that vehicles have a means to turn around in this area, including the fire equipment that may need to turn around. But we join in with Elizabeth in questioning why there is a need to install the different options that have been discussed, not only install those options, but for the town to incur the cost, because as Elizabeth has stated and shown in photographs, the need that the town has defined is already being met with the current layout of the turnaround that's already in place on town property. So we join with Elizabeth Seacat in requesting the town to reconsider its plans to install a Y and the associated materials that could be involved with that. We see it as an unnecessary expenditure and also one that is not needed because as the stated need suggests, that it's already being met with the existing space that's available for even very large vehicles to turn around in the space today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Would anybody else wish to address the Board of Trustees this evening? Madam Clerk?
Sir, I don't see anyone with their hand raised, but I did receive an email from Barney Drystat, and he would like it, he wanted it read in regards to the ordinance that's on first reading tonight, the wireless.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Let me see. All right. Please accept this comment for tonight's meeting under audience business. To to first reading of ordinance 1110, an ordinance of the Town of Lyons repealing and replacing Chapter 16, Article 11 of the Lyons Municipal Code concerning wireless communication facilities. Please consider adding a requirement for notification of residents within a reasonable distance, for example, 1,500 feet, of a site for which an application is submitted to the town for a proposed wireless communication facility to be notified of such application within a reasonable time, for example, 10 working days. Respectfully submitted, Barney Drystat, 108 Eagle Canyon Circle.
Thank you. Perhaps somebody else wishes to address the Board of Trustees? Madam Clerk?
I don't see any other hands raised, sir.
Okay. Sergeant Bill Chris, Boulder County Sheriff's Office report, sir.
All right, good evening, everybody. I have just a few items I'd like to discuss real quick. And it's more of a status report on things that are going on. Over the past weekend, there was a march through town down to the U Pump It. There was some graffiti that we found in Sandstone Park that was not well and good, as most graffiti is not. Fortunately, it was just chalk and more or less a tampering was washed off pretty quick by a lot of the folks that had gathered there. So I thank you very much for that. I'm always sorry to hear when that happens. And I hope next year we can get this camera system approved so that we can start following up a lot easier and start getting these guys that are doing this. Currently, I'm working with town and for revamping the holiday parade and the spooktacular. My IAP is complete and ready to be shipped over. Looks like what we're trying to do too is make a small change to the holiday lights parade, the December festivities, and change that route. The route that we use for the spooktacular is the most beneficial of all. It keeps the motorists flowing through town very easily. It's cost effective. It takes less folks to man, and it's a lot easier for the bigger trucks to get through. I'm a little worried about the old route that we used for the Holiday of Lights parade and the new path or roadway down there by 4th where it cuts over, 3rd. It's so tight and one way. And every single year, even when it was wider, we would strand larger trucks there. So working with Kim and everybody on that, and hopefully we can get that ironed out for your guys' review. Our Lucanen criminal mischief case is wrapping up. The final things are being taken care of there. The kids are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then we have been doing some continued traffic enforcement at some hot spots in town, to include the school zones and the 2nd Avenue Bridge area, McConnell and Carter for the stop sign. We've been trying to patrol Stone Canyon on the upper part, Main Street coming into town. We're still doing some patrols there. Over the past couple of weeks, we were able to clean up some parking complaints and especially some issues up on 2nd Avenue going up. There was some abandoned vehicles. There was some abandoned vehicles on Old Main that we were able to contact owners and things like that and get those vehicles removed, which really cleans up the streets. There was some trailers on 2nd Avenue as it heads north up the hill that really narrowed the road down to a 1 lane. And with the onset of winter, working really close with Dale, the code enforcement officer, to try to clean up any of those areas that we see as a problem, so we don't have to issue or don't have any issues as the snow starts to fly. Other than that, that is all I really have for my report. We're just staying very busy with basic stuff so far.
Any questions for Sergeant Chris? Thank you, sir. Please stay safe.
Thank you.
Trustee reports. I'll just go across the screen. Trustee Lowell.
Thanks, Mayor. We had a ecology board meeting back on the, I guess it was, well, we had an ecology board meeting, and it was a very light meeting. There was some discussion about the proposed Corona Hill bike path or access up to Hall Ranch. Some members of the ecology board have some information that I'm hoping they're going to share with the Parks and Rec Commission about that proposed route. All of it good, by the way. None of it was in opposition to the trail. So they just wanted to share some knowledge that they had. You know, in listening to Sergeant Chris talk about the abandoned cars and whatnot that he took care of, I had made mention, maybe 3 or 4 meetings ago, about getting the word out to all residents that our new parking ban on travel trailers, RVs, et cetera, is going to be going into effect. And I hope that we're going to get the word out. I hope nobody's surprised when that goes into effect. So I'm looking forward to seeing some announcement from the town, perhaps on the weekly email flyer or in the utility bill. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Rogan?
Thank you, Mayor. So a couple of items tonight. Mayor and I attended the ARPA funding meeting this morning with Commissioner Lokamine and got some great updates about what other municipalities are doing. Just a couple of interesting little factoids. 953 surveys have been completed to date. The survey is open until October 15th. The number one concern was, no surprise, housing costs. Number 2 was childcare and care for aging adults. And following closely behind were transportation and bridging the digital divide. So that was interesting to participate in. Otherwise, I want to say that I am so sorry to know that Yanni has taken a position elsewhere. I wish her nothing but the best. She's, as we all know, extremely talented and hardworking, and our loss is Fort Collins' gain. The EBC has yet to meet, and I want to address something Sergeant Chris touched on. So I was one of the co-organizers for the Women's March on Saturday. It was one of 600 marches nationwide. And when I showed up to Sandstone Park to start setting up, Sandstone Park, the stage, all the benches were covered in really disturbing graffiti. And I mean covered. And I'm grateful to whoever did this for doing it in chalk, because we were able to clean it up really fast with some water and some brushes. I want to tell whoever did this that they have the exact same right to freedom of speech and freedom of peaceful assembly as we do. And I hope that next time they take advantage of that instead of defacing our public property. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Waugh?
Good evening, everyone. My trustee report will be very short tonight. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend the last planning meeting, but they covered the comprehensive plan. So I think the good thing about that is that the citizen engagement kind of mechanism called Bang the Table will be being set up here in the next couple of weeks. So really the initial request for that feedback is typically one of the most robust in terms of responses. So I think it's going to be key for that. So I think the appropriate planning is taking place there. And, thanks for all the help from everybody on the Planning Commission, including Yanni on that. They also discussed the design guidelines primarily for downtown, and also the development review with some potential code updates with regard to that. So that's all I have for tonight, and good to see everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Caravas?
Like Kenyon, pretty light. In fact, probably lighter. All I've got is UEB will be meeting in 2 days on Wednesday at 4:30. Have not seen the agenda come out yet, so I can't tell what's on it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Trustee Miller?
Hi, I'm not sure if it's my internet or town's, probably mine, but it's a little spotty, so bear with me.
Yeah, your volume went off. Your volume went off, Trustee Miller.
Situation
There you
the
go.
housing thing that you were talking about. I talked to Mayor Angelo and Victoria about this a little bit. But I would like to discuss more about renters' rights here in town. Some sort of ordinance or legislation regarding a rental permit of some sort. I think I've brought this up before, but in light of the extraordinary amount of rent that people are paying, there's also an equal number of dilapidated homes that people are living in.
Your volume went off again.
And I feel like at some point there has to be some fairness, some sort of rental permit given or something where the town comes in and make sure that the place is actually livable, up to code, that sort of thing. Many other municipalities do this sort of thing. And I would like to see us take a look at that. Longmont is actually in the process of doing the same thing right now. So I think it's worth looking at, especially in light of, the massive amount of homelessness that is happening. I think we're going to see some really interesting things happening, especially also because Summit is coming in, although they are going to be their own authority. I do think that it's important to have them sort of in check as well. So just throwing that out there.
Thank you. Your voice went out a couple of times, but I think we got the essence of what your report was. The SFC met and a resolution for tonight's meeting. They'll be presenting their budget very shortly. It should be done any day. The Student Advisory Commission met. Sergeant Chris was there. It was a really great meeting. They thanked us for putting up the pride flag again. And they're continuing to solicit additional membership because most of the people on the commission are seniors and they want to make sure that there's continuity going forward. And what I'd like to give thanks about tonight is the staff again. We filled a key position, especially going into budget with our new finance director, but we're still very shorthanded, and the staff under the circumstances is doing a terrific job. And I just wanted to thank everybody. Please pass that on to the whole staff, Administrator Simonson. In regard to boards and commissions, I'll appoint Julie Hamilton to the revolving loan fund committee. Staff reports, flood recovery update. Tracy.
Sorry, trying to get to all my buttons here. Evening, everybody. Should be a quick report. Let's see. Let me clear that up real quick. Yes, excellent. I can just give a quick update on everything. So our, the Second Avenue Bridge is officially complete. They had to do some railing work and now that's done. So it's just some paperwork to close it out. So that is a completed project. The stormwater project that's going on over in Bone Park, that's moving on along pretty much on schedule. They're saying that they'll be complete with all the work by the end of next week, and then we'll do a punch list walk, and they'll touch up things the following week. So this project will be completed on or before the end of the month. The head bridge and the trail and sidewalk improvements, they're putting the finishing touches on the design, and we'll get it submitted over to CDOT for final approval. And we're hoping to get that out to bid by the end of this month. So we're moving along on that project. The backup power for the Public Works building, I believe the generators, they've been doing some work over there to prepare for the generator. And I think they've received it, and hopefully we'll get it installed this month. And then we're still sorting out some easements and other agreements between City of Longmont and Town Alliance for the backup power for the Eagle Canyon lift station. But that project's slated to be completed by the end of the year. And then as far as non-recovery projects, the US 36 Broadway improvements, we are working with Murray Smith to on getting a design proposal from them. And then once we sort out the fee, scope and fee and get them on their contract, then we will start design for that project in November. We just met today on the Black Bear Hole improvements, and we're going to do a trailhead at the 2nd Avenue parking lot and put a restroom there. And that project is they're also wrapping up design on that, and we hope to get that out to bid by the end of the month. So the bidding process takes 4 to 6 weeks. So a couple of these projects will be starting November, December timeframe. And then the trail extension project, we did get the agreement, the IGA in place with CDOT. And so I have drafted up the RFQ for design and the RFP for the right-of-way consultant. And I just sent those over to CDOT today to review and get their approval, and we can get those posted hopefully this month and start design and negotiations for that project in November. I think that's essentially all the projects that we're managing over here on the recovery side.
Tracy, I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
On it says on the LOMAR that we need a LOMAR for at least 6 recovery projects. And then it says staff is working to define scope and estimate. I know that LOMARs are expensive. Do you think that we'll have any cost estimate and strategy by budget time?
Yes, I mean, I've defined the scope of what we need, and I've filled in some of the costs, and now I'm working with the town engineer to get an estimate from them, because what I don't know is the how much the surveys are going to be, and then you have to do floodplain modeling. So I'm hoping, yes, that we can get a number from them in the next couple weeks, and then we could budget for it. Or I think the plan is to look for some funding for that, because it's going to be, like you said, quite expensive.
Okay. And then the other question I have is the 4th Avenue Bridge design. When will we get to see that?
Well, we have passed along current designs to our Parks and Rec Commission for review. For every project, we do create a website to get updates on what's going on, so we can post it on the website if you would like us to do that.
Or just a blow up of the design in town hall, so it can be reviewed. I know that we don't have a lot of people come in here, but I'd sure like to be able to see that.
Are you wanting to see like more of a rendering than like actual plans?
Exactly. Plans,
Okay.
I can't delineate plans. I don't have that kind of a mind, but a rendering would be wonderful.
Okay, I'll see if the engineer, that's not really in their scope, but I can see if we can do that, put something together. We are a little bit over budget on this, on the opinion of cost.
Okay.
So they are looking to trim a few things down. So some things in the current plan may not be there.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll definitely touch base with the engineers on that tomorrow.
Thank you. Any other questions for Tracy? None? All right.
Thank you.
You bet. Administrators report.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I have lots of odds and ends tonight, catching up on the past couple of weeks. First of all, as we've gotten used to, I try to do a quick COVID update. Probably the biggest news since we last met was that the CDC did officially recommend that Pfizer recipients receive a booster. We do want to let people know that if you go out to boco.org/COVID/vaccines, it will outline who's eligible for those and where those can be received. We do remain in what is still called high transmission, the red zone, in our county and most of the counties around us. I hate to say this, but our Boulder County death rate since June has been 10 individuals for a total of 269 Boulder County residents who have passed since this has started. We still have 26% of the overall population that has not received vaccine for one reason or another. Some are age, and others are, personal decisions. So I'm going to say on COVID tonight. I do want to let the board know that the 14-day notice of abatement to Benita Yoder and her property on 2nd Avenue has expired. And she did contact me over the weekend to say that she has started some minor exterior improvements, and she's hoping that's enough to not move forward at this time. However, that is not how the abatement notice is written. And so we will now issue what's called a show cause order, and Attorney Dittman will be drafting that required notice for that, and we'll be moving forward as planned. Do want to let the board know, and Attorney Dittman's going to talk more about this in his legal update. There's going to be a rather large opioid settlement, and one of the things that you might think about that and think, how does that affect Lions? Nonetheless, I'm sure we have our own cases of opioid problems that we might not be as aware of as some of the urban areas. But I want to let you know that there's a program called the Boulder County Co-Responders, and I do have some of their literature. This is a group that is currently funded by a grant through the Office of Behavioral Health. What it is every time our Boulder County sheriffs are called out to certain types of incidents, they send a mental health co-responder with that sheriff, because they're finding the majority of incidents involve mental health issues. So we have funding, and we're receiving that program right now, but their funding is going to run out. So I'm going to be passing along some information from our current team that serves us. They are requesting that we consider, the town of Lyons considers partnering with the town of Nederland and Ward to fund one co-responder, potentially with this settlement money. So it will be something we'll talk about in our budget meetings, but I do want you to know that their presentation to us involved that the highest calls for service within the Lyons town limits are number 1, domestic dispute, number 2, adolescent suicide, and number 3, a mental health crisis. So I just really want people to think about that. Is it a law enforcement, there should be the first responder there, or should they be accompanied with a mental health expert? So we'll talk about that a little more, but you'll get some information on what's called the Boulder County co-responders, and I'll make sure you get that to look at before we budget. The big slash limb drop-off event that we held on September 18th and 19th ended up having a very good response. There were 12 volunteers over both days. They had 80 trips to the Boulder County where they take the limbs and the mulch. So good turnout on that event. And Boulder County Zero Waste paid for the dumpsters. So win-win for everybody. The St. Vrain Invitational that occurred over the 17th and 18th. As we know, we host a large group of people there. We had 900 middle school runners on Friday and 1,600 high school runners on Saturday. We know this has a big impact on Lions Valley Park, but it literally is just a few hours. They're out of there usually in the afternoons. Do want to give people a heads up that there's another middle school race planned for October 23rd. So expect some of the same behaviors car-wise. Also, you should have all probably seen your Lions link, our newsletter that we put out every month. In there, you're going to see there's a change to Leaf's special event called Rave to the Grave that's traditionally been held out at Planet Bluegrass. This year, they did submit a special event permit and are asking to host that at Laverne Johnson. So that's a big kind of change on how that will occur. It will be adults only following the spectacular parade. So we will have our normal, we're going to do a COVID-safe spectacular event before the parade for the kids. And then after the parade, adults who want to go to Rave to the Grave, which is the largest fundraiser, I believe, for Leaf, that will be held in Laverne Johnson. It is not a town-sponsored event, just FYI. They're just moving it onto a different location. Also, you might have read in your newsletter that this week, October 3rd through the 9th, is Public Power Week. And just want to let all of you know, in case you don't know how unique that is, there are only 29 of us in the state, municipal utilities in the state, about 2,000 nationwide. And so there's a few little tips in your newsletter about ways to increase efficiency in our utility usage, but I do think it's really neat to think about that we are still out there running our own municipal utility, electric, at a reasonable competitive rate with really good efficiency of that. You know, we don't have near the power outages that some of our other providers do in the area, and that there's 29 of us statewide that are able to maintain that. So just be proud we are our own public provider. I got a lot of things that I don't have to read my whole report, but I do want to highlight some things. Would like to ask that the board consider having a discussion on the future use of the depot at an upcoming meeting, potentially if there's a lighter meeting that we could add that as a general business item. I think that would be healthy to start having that discussion. So whatever we decide, we can carry out over this last quarter of the year, since the flood recovery staff will be really very minimal by December, and they can be moved over to town hall at the beginning of the year. So we need to make some decisions about that. I also want to really note for the Board of Trustees that we did have to make a slight budget adjustment to our calendar. As everyone knows, the finance director position was open much longer than we'd hoped, and it did require us to make some changes. So our Saturday workshop is now October 23rd. After hearing feedback from some folks that the weekend before that we had planned was actually the fall break for both school districts. So October 23rd from 9 to 3 is when we get into really a deep dive of each different department. We will have a workshop at your next board meeting on the highlights of the budget. And then on the 23rd, we get into more detail. As Trustee Rogan already said, we have received the resignation of Rayana Jones, Yanni, who has been our historic preservationist and planning, helps in our planning department. She has just been so invaluable to the town in her short time here, instrumental to the Planning Commission to process improvements in that area, licensing of short-term rentals, the formation of the Historic Preservation Commission, and becoming a certified local government, and doing so much research on a variety of issues for us. So she has accepted a position with the city of Fort Collins. Her last day will be the end of this week. And we are going to greatly miss her, and it's going to leave a huge gap. So we are talking internally about how to pick up those pieces. And as you know, Philip in the planning department, those two make up our planning, is only budgeted at 20 hours a week. So we have 60 hours of work now to figure out how to cover 60 hours of work in the week. So just we want to ask for people's patience as we figure this out and realign duties. And as Trustee Rogan said, we just wish Yanni the very, very best. Hope she isn't a stranger, and wish her the best in her new endeavors. Also, there was an insert in your packet from the town clerk letting you know that our participation in the Boulder County coordinated election for our one single question on solar is going to cost $4,750. Boulder County had no questions on the ballot this time, so the cost has to be divvied up between those who did. So we just want to make you aware of that. And so it's higher than what we have previously. We always kind of anticipated about $3,500 for ballot questions. So that one has gone up quite a bit. And then two more things I think we just need to make people aware of. We, as well as the Highway 7 project going on between now and next May, we have also been notified that, we've been notified that Longmont will be starting their raw water line project. This will have a significant impact on the corner of 5th and Park. They are required by CDOT that they can only work at night from 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. So it's a 2-week project that is going to be during the night with noise and lights, and will have an impact on about 4 residents and some of the residents of Rivercliff. So we are expecting that project to start November 1st. And then it will move along from that location over to near Railroad and 2nd Avenue. And this is updating their whole new raw water line. They're putting in big new pump stations along the way. So I just want to let people know that's coming up. In addition to the Longs Peak project, and as Tracy said, finishing up the Bone Park stormwater. The asphalt looks really good over there. Drug Take Back Day, Saturday, October 23rd. This only happens a couple times a year. We really, really encourage people, go through your cabinets, take all your expired medications, whether it's aspirin or prescription meds, put them in a baggie and drop them off at the sheriff's substation here in Lyons on that day, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. This keeps them out of our landfills. It keeps it out of our water supplies, and they will dispose of them in a manner that is doesn't end up becoming a byproduct in another area. So really important, doesn't matter if it's a small bag or a big bag, just get them out of your household so others can't abuse them and that they don't end up in our water supply. I think, I know that was a lot. We are still working with 3 different developments in the Community Development Department. Andy CPAC at 402 Main Street, 400 and 402 Main Street is pursuing a minor subdivision process to condominiumize those two buildings into condo units. We have had a potential owner inquire about annexing the property at 19617 North St. Vrain Drive. That's that little sliver of land between the CDOT maintenance station and Eagle Canyon. So there's some inquiry there about annexation. And then we continue to work really close with Moss Rock Development, who will be doing the new hotel. You're going to be seeing those demolition permits starting to come to fruition over the next couple of months. Going to be a major visual change to that whole block. So prepare people for that to be happening here soon as well. And I think that's probably more than enough, but I'd like to get the board, make sure you know what's going on in town.
Trustee Watt?
Will the budget meeting be virtual?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, it's kind of short notice. When you told us 2 months ago, I understand that, but I mean, I made plans around the previous date, so it's
okay. Well,
it's really difficult to do a Saturday short notice on people. So I'll make it happen.
Is there an interest in the board on keeping it the 16th?
Yeah, that would be my comment. That was my call to you earlier today, is I'm probably a little more upset about it than Kenyon is saying or showing. We set this months out. We all know the schedule, all parents know the schedule. I know the finance director's not being there, but we have a very good board. We have a very knowledgeable board, a quick learning board that coming at us with the financials, what we got, we can work with, because we still have all of November and December to massage it and work it out, and we can get it caught up. Because like Trustee Waugh said, we know this for months, made plans, multiple plans. I got construction projects. My employers made plans around it and up and changing. I just saw it in our packet. That's makes it pretty difficult to do. So at this point, I won't be there. So do with it what you will.
Well, I can ask the clerk if you would like me to see, I mean, do we want to try to find a day during the week before that break so people have the 16th and the 23rd?
I'm not available during the week.
Is
the school break we know about? The school breaks we know about. You know about those before school starts. You know about before the school year ends. Mm-hmm. So I don't see anybody on this board, no offense to anybody, that's been sent to school.
I have a child in school. It's 4-day weekend. I won't be at that 17th one or 16th.
Well, but you knew that 2 months ago, right?
I also said that I wouldn't be there.
Well, we said it 16th, so if you want to change it, change it, but then I won't be there, and possibly Trustee Watt's gonna have to reschedule.
What was the justification for changing it, Administrator Simonson? Was it that the finance director needed more time to basically analyze the budget?
Well, that was part of it. And then I did receive notice from several people that it was this break weekend. It doesn't pertain to me personally, so it didn't matter. But then there was also a question of what day Mayor Pro Tem Browning was returning and if he was going to be missing it.
No, he's not. He'll be back. Trustee Lowell, what's your opinion, sir?
I had penned October 16th on my calendar, and I prefer to keep it on the 16th. I can do the 23rd, but whatever the majority, either day is good for me.
Trustee Rogan?
Either day is good for me, and I wonder if we could entertain the possibility of maybe splitting it into a couple of different meetings that could happen on evenings where people could attend. I don't know if that's ever been done before.
Why don't we have you poll the board on several different scenarios, Administrator Simonson, and like Trustee Lowell said, we'll go with what the majority feels is prudent. I don't like two trustees at one time saying that they're not going to attend because it was scheduled for a date that was basically changed and they had made plans. So personally, honestly, I would prefer to keep it on the 23rd. And, so that's my personal opinion, but why don't you see if we can get that 4th, and if that's the case, that's what we'll do.
And
I
then,
believe it was to be on the 16th, wasn't it? That was the originally scheduled date, was the 16th.
yes, that was the original
Excuse
date.
me,
That's correct.
excuse me, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay.
Does it matter to the board if some of the department heads aren't there?
Why wouldn't they be there on the 13th, on the 16th? That's when it's been scheduled for several months.
I know, but because they also have families they're trying to balance.
And that break was scheduled, the St. Vrain Valley School District schedule is published at least 1 year in advance. I'm sorry that it's inconvenient, but I planned travel around this. I planned a bunch of things around this, and it's really inconvenient less than 2 weeks out to just change the date on a meeting that's this important.
Let's poll the board and see what the majority says, Administrator Simonson, and that's what we'll do. We already know how two members of the Board of Trustees feel. And I would prefer to, even though I made a mistake thinking it was the 23rd, I would prefer to keep it on the date that it was originally scheduled.
Well, then it looks like you have your majority, sir.
I don't know where the 4th is. Trustee Lowell?
I'll do the 16th is good.
Okay, then I do have the 4th. So we'll keep it on the 16th, and I would just advise department heads that this is an extremely important meeting, and perhaps they can't attend all of it, but they should definitely attend the pertinent part that their particular budget is involved in. I'd like to just ask you a couple of questions on the Longmont water line. Is that when they're going to do the project in the triangle across from the post office at the same time?
This is a portion of that, yes.
Okay. And the other comment I'll just make, just for myself, is that I think the co-responder program is an extremely important program, and I know that it's gaining acceptance nationwide, and I support it 100%. And I hope that we get some funding from the opioid settlement to be able to either subsidize it or pay for it in full. Any other questions, Trustee Caravas?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Victoria, thanks for the report. Hope you had a good weekend too out east.
Thanks.
Do you have any more information on 407 Steamboat Valley Road by chance from when this report was written, or is that it?
Yes. The information on, I did put the latest on Thursday in my packet. I did not get any other feedback from the county Friday or today. Basically, it does appear that Mr. Calvin has laid gravel in the right of way going out to Vasquez. I should back up. For those who aren't familiar with this, Mr. Calvin had asked if he could access his home he was building at 407 Steamboat, which is in the county. If he could access, because his house is on the cul-de-sac of Vasquez Court, if he could access his house from there, as even though it was in the county. The board had a discussion on this, you might recall, October of 2020. And he had said at that point he wasn't going to need that access after all. But the neighbors contacted me and said, it sure appears he's pouring a driveway and that he's putting in a driveway to Vasquez. So I contacted the county right of way and said he does not have permission to do that. He needs to come back to the board and request it. Director Kaplan went out and said that it is just gravel in our right of way. It's not concrete. So now that I'm back, I'll work with the county this week to see what they found, because I had suggested they might want to do a stop work order on that until we could get this resolved. But I did not hear back Friday or Monday.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any further questions? Trustee Rogan.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question to just go back to the budget for a second. So any trustees who are not able to attend whatever date the meeting is there a way to get their input in advance? Will we have a preliminary budget in time enough? For example, if Trustee Miller can attend, can she provide her input in writing so that we can consider it during the workshop?
That's a question for you, Administrator Simonson.
Sure. I mean, we can certainly do that. The bigger conflict with me is that we weren't having our overall budget meeting till the 18th, because we either had tonight or the 18th, and it's not ready tonight with Cassandra just having, 3 weeks under her belt.
Got it.
So I'm going to have to figure out some other strategies with this one.
Okay. Thank you.
But we can certainly figure out a way to get input the how we did on, the original budget suggestions. So it'll just be a little more detailed. I think my bigger concern is I don't believe Director Kaplan will be here to go through the utilities.
Right, sorry, I had to run, but I'm back if you did call me.
I just mentioned that I didn't think you were available on the 16th.
Okay. I guess you'll have to do a comprehensive written report then. Okay, he's nodding his head yes. That's good.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Okay, we'll move on. A legal update, Counselor.
Thank you, Mayor Angelo. Well, my update hopefully won't be too long. Let me pull up my notes here real quick. So first, I just want to echo Public Power Week. I think as many of you know, I'm the attorney for CAMU, the Colorado Association of Municipal Utilities. So I will be going to the CAMU meeting this week in person for the first time, thankfully, since I've been appointed as CAMU attorney. And so it'll be nice to see all the other municipal utility representatives there as well. So go Public Power. Next, I want to give a brief update on the Callahan matter. I mentioned at the last meeting that we had reached a settlement with the Callahans, consistent with the board's direction. Unfortunately, we were not able to finalize all the verbiage on the settlement agreement that their attorney drafted until today. And so that was not on this agenda, but will be on the next one for the board's consideration and potential approval if the board still wishes to reach a settlement along the terms we had discussed in our previous executive session and the legal update. Next, I want to mention the Yoder matter. First, I think Victoria covered pretty well the nuisance abatement portion of that, where this week I'll be sending out or drafting a notice for the show cause order, which is a hearing before the town administrator. One thing I wanted to get board direction on is whether or not the board would authorize to hire a hearing officer to hear that. The concern is of, I think the town administrator is obviously empowered to hear this, but there's certainly the argument could be made that she could not be impartial in this due to her involvement with the Yoder matter. And so I think we would need some feedback on whether the board would feel comfortable hiring a hearing officer for a couple hours to hear the show cause. And so if there are any questions on that, or
and what is what cost do you think that would be?
Probably in the range of a couple $100 an hour. So I'd say from $200 to $300 an hour, probably from my experience. Is it typically the people who do a hearing officer job, are retired city attorneys.
Just to be safe and prudent, I think that would be smart. How does the rest of the board feel about that, Trustee Lowell?
I don't really like it. I mean, couple hours or $200 to $300 an hour, it's $500 or $600, and there certainly must be some upfront prep work for this. Is that true, Attorney Dittman?
Yes, I mean, the hearing officer would probably look at the documentation. I mean, it's somewhat limited in this case. It would just be limited to the notice that was sent, pictures of, it'd be up to the hearing officers to set the schedule and what they would like to see before the show cause hearing, but I would assume that it'd be limited to, the original notice that was sent for the abatement, and then, pictures and documentation concerning the condition of the property.
So would that preparatory work be part of the 2 to 3 hours that you thought, or the 2 hours you suggested?
No, it would not be. That'd be additional. So it'd be a couple more.
So we're probably talking $1,000 to $1,200 when all is said and done. And my second question would be, are any of these costs recoverable through our actions against Ms. Yoder?
Not in this proceeding. They would not be.
I'm just throwing up my hands here. I mean, we all know what the condition of that house has been for 8 years, and now we have to spend an additional $1,000, $1,200 just to make it right. I'm not in favor of it, frankly.
Trustee Rogan?
I am in favor of it. I think considering Ms. Yoder's propensity to drag things out, I think it would be helpful to have a hearing officer, and I think it would wind up saving us money in the long term.
Trustee Caravas?
I'll concur with what Trustee Rogan just said.
Trustee Miller?
I think it's probably a good idea.
Trustee Waugh?
I agree. I think it's a good idea. I hate that we have to spend this money. I think it's been an issue that's dragged on and we need to get it resolved.
To answer Trustee Waugh's statement, will this resolve it, Counselor?
Well, I think, will this fully resolve it, to be seen? I mean, there's obviously, we made a change to the municipal code. You may remember recently that she has an appeal option to the municipal court as well. If you have a robust record before the hearing officer, then the likelihood of the municipal court spending much time on this is greatly reduced. And so you save money on that end. And then of course, any municipal decision is appealable pursuant to 106.
Right.
And it's Colorado Civil Procedure. So that would be an option for her as well. And so it remains to be seen where the finality of this is. The next item I was going to speak of on the Yoder issues, I think you're all aware that we're currently being sued by Ms. Yoder as well under a 106 lawsuit. Our response to that is due on Wednesday. And so we'll be filing that as well. So there are a variety of options available to Ms. Yoder to prolong this process. We will be asking for costs as part of all of this that Sheila are responsible for, which, hopefully when it finally is resolved, we put as a lien on her property that would be paid out whenever the property is sold. But, there's a variety of due process options available to Ms. Yoder should she choose to pursue them before we can finally abate this property.
I think you got the direction of the Board of Trustees in regard to the hearing officer, Administrator Simonson, Counselor Dittman. Anything else?
We'll be responding to the Yoder complaint on Wednesday, and we'll keep the board. I'm sure there will be a board update at the next meeting, probably as part of executive session on the results of that. We intend to dismiss this lawsuit. So that's the update on Yoder for right now. That's it. So the next thing I want to talk about, and Victoria already kind of touched on it to some degree, is the opioid settlement. The Attorney General for the state of Colorado, Phil Weiser, his department, reached a settlement along with several other states with the 4 primary opioid manufacturers with regards to their financial responsibility for the opioid crisis. This is literally fresh off the presses. It just came out this morning. So we have not had the time to fully analyze what we need to do to be part of this settlement. However, CML has already sent out correspondence to myself, and all town attorneys and city attorneys that it would behoove us to be part of the settlement due to, Colorado as a state will get more money the more cities and towns participate in the settlement. And really, you're only eligible, depending on how this eventually plays out, you may only be eligible to participate in the settlement. And so we need to do some further research on what we need to do if that's something the town would be interested in. It is likely that we will probably have an action item on the next agenda as part of the process for accepting or joining the settlement discussion. But the long and the short of it is that there's a call for members to be part of the settlement class, and it would probably be in the town's interest to be part of that settlement class, so we would receive funds which could be used for the things that Administrator Simonson spoke of. So more to come on this. It's brand new, but I think it's likely we will see an agenda item on the next agenda with concern to this. And then finally, the last update I wanted to give with regard to the small cell issue with Crown Castle. You may recall at the last meeting, we had discussed that we were going to meet on site mostly to observe with Crown Castle and some of the concerned citizens in the Eagle Canyon neighborhood about moving that facility. The affected residents decided they would like to postpone that meeting in order to review some of the responses and the core requests that they served on the town. The town did respond to. That has not been rescheduled yet, so there is no real update on where that will be moved precisely. It was installed in the wrong location, what is up of it now, so it will be removed in its entirety and moved somewhere. The talk is to do it across the street, but there's no final location yet been determined because that meeting has not been rescheduled. So I'll keep providing updates every Board of Trustees meeting until it does get moved. But as of right now, there's really no update. And that's all I have, unless there's any questions for me.
Are there any questions for Counselor? Seeing none, we'll move on. Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you.
Please read the next item into the record, Madam Clerk.
Yes, the next item is the first reading of ordinance 1110, an ordinance of the town of Lyons, Colorado, repealing and replacing Chapter 16, Article 11 of the Lyons Municipal Code concerning wireless communication facilities.
Counselor.
Thank you, Mary Angelo. I am not going to repeat the workshop I did earlier tonight. For those of you that in the public who may have not been a part of that workshop, I'll give a brief synopsis of what we discussed. But essentially, there have been numerous changes in state and federal law concerning wireless communications facilities within the past decade. That has really accelerated in pace within the last 5 years. And that's really a result of changes in technology that new devices, particularly small cells in the right of way, have been encouraged through a tightening of our regulatory authority over those facilities, both at the state and federal level. And so the town's existing wireless code, which is a vintage of, I think, the mid 2000s, is out of date and out of step with the current state, federal, and state law. And so the intention of redrafting the wireless code is really to come into compliance with federal and state law. Large portions of that ordinance are technical in nature, and that's not by our choice, but by really the requirements of the federal law and really the mandates of the Federal Communications Commission, which provide very specific requirements on how certain things are defined and what certain review periods exist, and what the remedies are for the telecommunications providers if we fail to site the facility in a timely manner, which are namely that they get to build it without any permission from the town. And so another thing to keep in mind too is that our regulatory authority is limited to one, municipal boundaries. So anything in federal service land outside of town or in state or county land, we wouldn't have any authority over. And then two, it's limited in that we don't have control over state right of way or federal right of way. I don't think there is any federal right of way in Lyons, but over state right of way, the CDOT Highway 36 corridor, we really don't have a whole lot of control over over that area, especially if it's a CDOT facility. If it's a CDOT facility, we have no control over what that looks like, where it's located, those sorts of things. The other thing too, that's often a question from the public that I mentioned in the workshop is that we are wholly preempted, along with the state of Colorado, even from regulating any sort of environmental effects of wireless facilities. And so electromagnetic frequency and radiomagnetic frequencies are hot topic usually. And unfortunately, due to federal overreach in this case, we are wholly preempted from regulating on that basis. And so this code does not address that specifically. All we do is ask for compliance through the provision of a federal license, which shows compliance with those rules that they regulate on this federal level. And that's about the extent to which we can ask for anything. So we did the most we can under the current state of the law. And so that's kind of the broad overview of what we're doing, is bringing the code into compliance with the current state of federal and state law concerning telecommunications facilities, which is on whole very limiting to our authority over these facilities. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions. I know we covered this pretty extensively in the workshop.
Are there any questions for Counselor? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve ordinance 1110 on first reading at this time.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote.
Oh, Trustee Rogan, did you have your hand raised?
I'm sorry, Trustee Rogan.
That's okay. I was quick about that. Concerning Barney Dreestadt's letter that was read into the record earlier, is it, I'm sorry, this maybe should have been a question. Is it a matter of policy, or can it be written into the ordinance that the town provides a notice of a small cell tower?
It could be done either way. There's nothing prohibiting us on federal law from providing notice. It can certainly be a matter of administrative policy as well. And Denver has that in their administrative regs, that neighborhood notification be provided. Where the town is aware of the facility. Of course, as we discussed in the workshop, there may be facilities which we are not aware of for a variety of reasons, that we don't have any regulatory authority over them. But certainly, we can, through either this ordinance or through our administrative policies, we can create a notification requirement.
Okay. I have nothing else. Thank you.
And one thing to note too, I forgot to mention, is there were a couple of indentation issues in the version that got uploaded online. I have fixed those, and so those will be fixed for the second reading.
Okay. No further discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Sir, Victoria, did you have your hand up?
I did. I just wanted to know if the board, if it was their desire for us to try to add something before second reading about the notice when we do get it in time. There might be times we can't give 10 days, but maybe we can give 7. Is that something you want us to try to add in to the comments or not? So that
Counselor, should that be an amendment?
I think since we don't have it drafted, it's probably not a good idea to do an amendment now. I mean, if you'd like this to be in the code rather than just administrative policy,
okay,
we can have a proposal ready
okay,
by the next meeting for you to review.
Okay, Trustee Rogan.
Thank you. I was thinking more along the lines of a policy. For example, the reason that Administrator Simonson said, we don't know how much notice the town is going to get. If it's an administrative policy to give people as much notice as possible, I think that's just fine, and I'm fine with this the way it is.
Okay. Any other discussions, questions, anything? All right, we'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
and Trustee Miller.
Yay.
Ordinance 1110 passes unanimously, 6-0. Madam Clerk, could you please read the consent agenda into the record?
Yes, item 1 is Resolution 2021-100, resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, requesting and recommending that Boulder County collaborate with the Town of Lyons to review connecting trails between Lyons' existing parks and trail system and Hall Ranch open space via the Hat Rock / Corona Hill area. Item 2 is Resolution 2021-103, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the Fourth Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement with Anderson Consulting Engineers Incorporated for design services for the Stormwater Improvements Project. Item 3 is Resolution 2021-104, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the 15th Amendment to the construction agreement with Walsh Construction Incorporated for Bone Park Phase 2. Item 4 is Resolution 2021-105, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, declaring a climate emergency and establishing Lyons' commitment to taking immediate action to address this climate crisis, which is already impacting our community and will continue to do so at an accelerated pace unless the town acts now. Item 5 are the October accounts payable, and item 6 are the September 20th, 2021 Board of Trustees meeting minutes.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any items that any trustee wishes to remove from the consent agenda at this time?
Poll number 4, please.
Okay. Any others? We'll vote on approving the consent agenda with the exception of item 4. I'll call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Rogan,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Waugh.
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved as amended. Trustee Caravas, item 4.
Okay, thank you. I pulled this, not only from my own feelings, but many people have contacted me concerning the way the statement reads. We have multiple board members on this board over the last year and a half talked about finances. We need to control, we need information before we vote on something. This says we have to do a lot of things, but it doesn't tell us what. So what are you voting on? Where are you going to fund? Where's it going to come from? Doesn't say. We usually send things back to staff to get that information quite often. And like I said, many people on this board have already indicated those exact things. And then attributing to floods, fires, we all know long-term overgrown forest that the country and the state officials have admitted they let overgrown for 50 years. Has nothing to do with climate change. Beetle kill has nothing to do with climate change. So using those words in the whereas is the valley that we sit in, lines in the river that runs through it, has been cutting through rock for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. During those hundreds of thousands of years, there's been 5 ice ages. So putting that kind of information in the whereas with strict fear tactics to people, and then saying, coming from a committee that's supposed to provide information to a board, education, teachings, then not necessarily legislate and dictate. But since they are dictating, what are they demanding change? So what harm are we supposed to put on people that just have to be accepted, especially when we've been fighting for affordable housing for 8 years now, Trustee Miller, maybe longer. I know the flood accelerated with the loss of that many homes, and then we're going to put additional harms on them. What level of harm are we going to put on them? Doesn't say, nothing says here. Ethically, I don't think this is very sound. And legally, I don't think it's very sound either. So I'll be voting no.
Any further comments? Trustee Lowell.
Yeah, I tend to agree with trustee Caravas on a lot of points, and don't take this the wrong way. I'm the biggest environmental guy around, but the resolution itself sort of rings hollow. There isn't any specific actions that are addressed in it. I'm also a little troubled by in section 2, when they say further proclaims it is the intent of the town to do everything in its power to swiftly and decisively address this climate emergency. It's town with a capital T, so it sounds like it's talking about the municipality being the staff and board of trustees rather than the collective town, which would be the residents. So it's just a little, it's a little vague. It makes a lot of wonderful pronouncements, but there's not a lot of meat on the bones. That's my only comment.
Further comments?
I just wanted to point out too,
Go ahead,
that this was from the FSC drafted, and the only changes that I've made to it is just cleaning up the language and putting it in the proper form, not changing the substance since it was something that I was directed to draft, just kind of passing the message along for the board's consideration. And the staff hasn't had any really input into this. It's just been from the FSC.
It was from the SFC, and it was their concern to align with, to be honest with you, the president's proclamation in regard to addressing climate change in any way possible. So yeah, I think that perhaps it's general, but its intent, I think, in the long run, is going to be very, very important, especially when we see the situation accelerating at an exponential rate that nobody ever expected, to be perfectly honest with you. So I'll be voting in favor of it as the SFC liaison. Counselor?
And I will say also that I read this to be a proclamation and really a statement of intent and not really any binding requirement on the town. I don't think anyone could argue that also that's any sort of binding commitment on the town to take any particular action.
That is correct. Trustee Lowe.
Yeah, I just worry about the effectiveness of these proclamations. So let's, we pass this tonight. It's wonderful, as Attorney Dittman says. It's just a general statement of our support. But then it sort of goes away in the ether and nobody pays attention to it. It's not like, when the next contract comes up for utility work in Lyons, do we hearken back to this proclamation and make certain conditions of the contractor that he fulfills some of the stuff here that we have in this proclamation? That's my only point with it. I don't disagree with anything that's stated here. I just think it sort of rings hollow and doesn't have a lot of utility at this point.
Any further comments? Then we entertain a motion.
I'll move to not pass resolution 2021-105.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to not approve resolution 2021-105. Any further comments? If not, I'll call for the vote.
So a vote yes if it is for it to vote down.
That's right. And a vote no is approval.
Yep.
I'll call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
No.
trustee Lowell,
No.
trustee Caravas,
Yes.
Well, Trustee my apologies. Trustee Caravas, a vote yet. Yes is the vote down, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just make sure. I confused myself. It's so confusing.
Go
So.
Continue, Madam Clerk.
Trustee Miller,
I'm gonna vote. I'm gonna vote yes on this one.
Trustee Waugh,
Yes.
and Trustee Rogan.
No.
It's a tie, Counselor, so it does not go down. Is that correct? A tie vote means
We could
that
have, it doesn't
the
pass
motion-
either.
That's right.
So you
what-
could have another vote to see if it passes if you wanted to, or it could just die.
My preference was originally to delay this vote until Mayor Pro Tem Browning was here, so that we wouldn't find ourselves in a position like this perhaps. Can we delay this and put this on the next agenda?
We could delay to a date certain if you so wished.
How does the board feel about that? Trustee Lowell?
Let me see if I'm clear on this. We voted 3-3.
Yes.
And now we're going to take a second vote on it. We're going to resurrect the whole resolution in another meeting.
So like whatever the motion is can't pass with a tie.
That's right.
And so the vote down failed. And so there's still this item on the table. So there either needs to be a vote in favor, which fails, or a vote to continue.
What, well, couldn't the SFC take the feedback they heard tonight and adjust it and
That
propose
could
it?
also be an option. We could,
Okay, it doesn't have to be the
redirected.
exact same thing.
Yeah, we'll pursue it, but to get back to the point, it can be brought up at the next meeting again. Is that true?
It could, or whichever meeting the board would like. There's multiple
Is that-
options at this point for the
Is
board.
is that acceptable to the board? Trustee Lowell?
I think we need a motion and a second on that. That's
On that? On bringing it back?
on a continue. That requires a motion as well.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to continue.
To which date?
Let's do, to give everybody time, date certain, the first meeting in November, which is it the first?
The first, yes.
Yes, date certain to November 1st. Trustee, we need a motion.
I'd like to move to continue this issue to a date certain, November 1st.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any comments? I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Waugh,
Aye.
and Trustee Rogan.
Aye.
Resolution 2021-105 is continued to November 1st meeting. Thank you. The next item on the agenda, please read it into the record, Madam Clerk.
The next item on the agenda is discussion of the Lions Valley Park outlaw and transfer of warranty deed.
Staff?
Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. I'm Yanni Jones. I work for the town as a historic preservationist and planner. I'll be providing some background information on this item for your consideration tonight. So this item before you is some information on the outlots in the Lions Valley Park area. This information was requested by Trustee Lowell at a previous meeting. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can all look at this map together. Are you all seeing the map on your shared screen? Excellent. Okay. So this is an ownership map of showing the outlots around the Lions Valley Park filing number 8. You can see Carter Drive up there in the top right corner of your screen. So I've identified the owners of each of these parcels, the address and the acreage of each one. So the parcel particularly in question today is the largest one in the bottom left of your screen at 0 Red Gulch. It's owned currently by Lions Valley Park, and it's about close to 42 acres. So the ownership of this parcel is it's in question right now because of the original SIA subdivision improvement agreement with Lions Valley Park, which is included, a section of that is included also in your packet. That 1986 document outlines a schedule for the deeding over of these different outlot parcels to the town from Lions Valley Park. In that original agreement, the parcel identified here as 0 Red Gulch, as well as the town-owned parcel identified as 0 Carter/Outlot B, those were considered one parcel at that time in the 80s. It was called Tract G. So this parcel in its entirety should have been deeded over to the town at the time of the filing of, or the platting of filing number 8. However, because of the way, or staff believes, because of the way that the preliminary plat for Lions Valley Park split this particular parcel over 2 plan sheets, it may have been excluded on accident, perhaps. But effectively what this means is that the large parcel, the 42 acres at 0 Red Gulch, should be conveyed to the town through warranty deed if it has not already. So staff is working with Boulder County at this moment to review the record images of the deed for the parcel known as 0 Carter Drive to compare the legal description of that parcel to identify whether it indeed does include this larger section as well. And if it does not, Attorney Dittman will be preparing a warranty deed so that parcel could be conveyed to the town. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Comprehensive as usual. Thank you, Yanni. And we all hate to see you go. We can tell you to your face now. You've done just a terrific job. Thank you very much. Trustee Lowell.
Yeah, thanks, Yanni, for all you've done, and thanks for this comprehensive report. My whole point in bringing this up initially was that it was an investigation which you have done very thoroughly, because for years I had been hearing that largest lot, 42.94 acres, I think it is, that's where the L sits, by the way. That's where the high school L is now sited, belonged to the town. But every time I had occasion to check on the Boulder County Property Survey, it still showed it under Lions Valley Park. Thanks for the explanation on Tract G, because I'm looking through this 35-year-old typewritten document here, and they're talking about Tract E and Tract B and Tract G and Tract F and Tract D, and I don't find anything on I have the filing 8 map here in front of me. I don't see any correspondence between those and what I'm seeing. So thanks for clearing that up. My other question, though, is those 2 small lots, the 1.24 acres and the 0.21 acres, which would have been, had Michael Markell done what he had intended to do, those would now be the backyards of a few houses on what was to be a bump out, which he abandoned because of the ledge that he encountered there. So those are fairly recent. That filing 8 was in 2014, so it was just 7 years ago that those 2 smaller lots apparently were deeded as open space. Did you find anything in your investigation about those 2 smaller lots? And number one, when were they created? And the obligation to deed those to the town?
those two smaller lots, so if you're looking at the map, they're the ones just east of the school's parcel. We believe they were created during the replatting of filing 8, which happened several years ago. I can't recall the precise date, Trustee Lowell. But I believe Administrator Simonson intends to reach out to Mr. Bell about those parcels as well, given that they were not in the original preliminary plat.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was 2014, the date of filing 8, and that was at the point where Michael Markell decided he wasn't going to do that bump out, which would have been I don't know how many lots he had there, 7 or 8 houses, and he knocked it down to like 4 or 5. So good. I'm glad we're on it, and I'm looking forward to a resolution of this. We can tie up another loose end. Thank you.
Administrator Simonson.
Thank you. And just to add a couple more comments, I think part of the confusion here is from Mr. Bell's perspective, he did give the deed in escrow to the town. So he thinks it's the town's. He knows he's paying the taxes on it every year and he's ready to be done with that. So he wants this to happen as bad as we do. But I think that's part of the verbiage problem is when you talk to him, he said, I did give it to the town. You know, you're holding it, not us, although he's paying the taxes. So I feel confident we'll get to the bottom of this. And if not, as Yanni said, Attorney Dittman will draft a warrant, a new deed, and Mr. Bell will sign that. So time is of the essence, obviously, with just the current situation, but I think we can get through this one.
Any further questions? I can't wait to finalize it. Thank you. Thank you, Yanni. Thank you for everything, Yanni. Discussion for future agenda items. Does anybody have any agenda items that they'd like to address in the future? A summary of action items, Madam Administrator, Madam Clerk first, excuse me.
Yep, the first one I have was the mayor would like a rendering of the 4th Avenue pedestrian bridge for Town Hall. The budget meeting to be held on 10/16 instead of 10/23. Administrator Simonson would like the board to consider future use of the depot building. Opioid class action settlement participation, hopeful to fund the Boulder County Sheriff's co-responder program with funds. The next one I have is resolution 2021-105 was moved to the November 1st meeting. And the last thing is the follow-up with Mr. Bell on the L Hill.
Administrator Simonson.
I do have to bring back, resolution 105 on November 1st specifically. That's similar. And then I did have Trustee Miller requested that we talk about renters' rights and some of those things. So I don't know if she's requesting that be a future item, but I did have that as a future item. And then also getting the word out about the RV parking restrictions that are coming up. We were planning to start that in October, so we will be doing that. And then I think that's all.
Counselor?
Just to follow up on Trustee Miller's item too, the other thing I heard too that seemed like a little bit of a research project is looking into a renter licensing program for people who rent properties.
Yeah, that was part of, I don't know if you could hear me earlier, I know I was cutting out, but rental permits was part of that request. There are a lot of other municipalities that are looking into that and have implemented that, including Longmont at the present moment.
And Trustee Miller, if you have any information on who's implemented that, sending that either to myself or probably myself and Mr. Simonson would be helpful.
Sure.
So we don't have to start from scratch, right? And I'm very familiar with short-term rental licensing programs, but I'm not familiar with too many long-term or multifamily licensing programs. So
Yep, no problem.
thank you.
Anything else?
Um,
Anybody have anything else to add? No? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a
I'll second that.
second? We
I'll
have a,
second that.
we have a motion and a second. I'm sure there's no discussion. I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
trustee Lowell,
Waiting till 8:45. Nick knows what I mean. Yeah.
trustee Caravas,
Yes, aye.
trustee Waugh,
Aye.
trustee Miller,
Yay.
and trustee Rogan.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned and we set a new record. That's really efficient, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Enjoy your
everyone.
Have a good night.
evening.
Night.
Enjoy
Stay
your
well.
evening.
Everybody.
Stay healthy, everybody.